Hello, everybody, and welcome to CNR, a podcast created and hosted by Samuel R. Blakeledge. Welcome to episode 3 of this season, and we have a special guest reader with us today. Julian J. Alexander will be reading his written short here on the channel for us this evening. Julian is a brilliant writer and phenomenal speaker. His writing is sure to chill you to the bone. He is also a fantastic musician, composer, and guitarist, and I highly recommend you give him a listen and a read. Please go check out his awesome work linked in the description below and show this man some support. Now, before I start, I would like to talk about our sponsor, GoPlantBased.me by Samuel Anthony. He will be creating a website for my personal writing and a section for CNR. Please go check out his Instagram and website, which will also be linked below. It is absolutely phenomenal what is going on over at GoPlantBased.me. The whole aim behind it is to live a more sustainable life, promote veganism and help fight global warming, and overall make a beneficial change to the world and people's lives. As a recently turned vegan, I can say that his recipes are absolutely perfect, healthy, and delicious, and my overall favourite is the lentil dal. Now, as a fan of exotic meals, that one is sure to hit the spot. Samuel also hosts his own fitness classes that include things such as simple workouts to yoga classes, and all of his Zoom classes, it is worth noting, are all free, which is absolutely amazing. Lastly, welcome back everyone, and tune your ears to Cestrum Nocturnum Radio.
Episode 3 The Pale Soldier. This is Peter Bridgeford of Cestrum Nocturnum Radio, a private radio station for the employees at the Enigmatic Investigation Bureau for the Abnormal. You are now listening to a private broadcast for the sole purpose of investigation. This is loop number 33, statement given and recorded by a Mr. Alan Smith, British Army Corporal, 7th Battalion, Gloucestershire Regiment. On the 5th of August, 1928, age 34 years old. Recording recovered and restored from a phonograph record, now considered to be one of the founding loops of the EIB's extensive archive. Beginning loop.
I suppose I've seen almost everything that no man would wish to see over the course of his life. Having served in the British Army during the war, I can confirm with the utmost certainty that war is an exhibition of mankind at its worst, its greediest, and its most primitive. That I have no doubt about. Some of the horrors that I witnessed serving in the 7th Battalion, however, stretch beyond rationale and beyond the wickedness of man, dare I say. I am certain of what I saw in Gallipoli, and I swear that what I am about to tell you is the truth. It was early January of 1916, the 4th, to be exact. Now, our regiment had been fighting in Gallipoli since August, having suffered heavy losses of life against the Ottoman forces from the very beginning. We received word in December that we were to be evacuated from Suvla Bay, and just like that, the proceedings began almost immediately, with the first troops being shipped back to Greece on the 7th of December. We had been fending off Ottoman attacks all the while that we awaited rescue, hoping in each of our minds that we would be the next to be evacuated. The lull between conflicts was always bizarre. The air was rife with tension. You always felt as though the next whiff of freshly used gunpowder wasn't too far away. For myself, well, those moments had taken on a completely different kind of worry. Since late November, there had been a new soldier in our regiment. No one noticed him. None ever acknowledged him initially, but he was there. I did not know, and still do not know, where he came from. He simply appeared, following a particularly chaotic skirmish. His uniform was, of course, the same as the rest of ours, as was the way he carried his rifle, as was the way that he fought, but he was not one of us. His skin was pale, as though dusted with ash, and from my observations of him from afar, his eyes were black, cold. There was no feeling on display, but despite his stark appearance, no one ever questioned him, no one spoke of him. But I always had the impression that at least some others in the regiment observed his presence as quite obscure. It was the strangest thing, despite being so perplexed, despite thinking so much about it, at the time I could never find it in myself to just walk up to him and ask him who the devil he was. I would sit in an embankment and watch him sharpen his musket some 50 feet away, but any time I felt any compulsion to walk over to him, it seemed like lead weights had been fastened to my ankles. I would just sit and stare. Sometimes I'd turn away to tend to something, and upon looking back, I'd find that he was gone. And naturally, I thought myself insane, only for him to appear moments later, just a few feet behind me. It truly was as though he had some kind of hold on all of us. Somehow, I found it in myself to ask one of our commanding officers about our apparent new transplant, and he just stared at me and said, "I know nothing of that." Can you believe that? All the while that I was conversing with that officer, that pale man stared right at us with those dead eyes, and the officer still insisted that he hadn't the foggiest idea where he came from. Frankly, he seemed entirely unconcerned and irritated that I had even asked. The first instance where we realized that something truly beyond our understanding was happening was in the wee hours of the 20th of December, 1915. Our regiment awoke to gunfire and commotion several hundred yards away from our embankment. Now, of course, we feared that we were to be overrun by an Ottoman ambush that would wipe us out before rescue. As soon as the cacophony had begun, however, it seemed to cease. I had heard cries in Turkish, but they were not war cries or officers barking orders. They were cries of horror, of panic unlike I'd ever heard before. I believe it was Lieutenant West who was the first to climb the embankment after the rest of us had sat in confused silence for what felt like an hour after the last scream had rung out. I recall feeling unwell, watching him climb up the embankment and crawl cautiously through the grass. Half a minute later, I heard him call out, "My God!" And let me tell you, my friend, the lieutenant was not a man easily swayed by the grisly sights of war. I'd seen him wade through water that ran red with blood, clamber over mountains of corpses, just with a stone face, but I was not prepared for what I saw when I found myself looking upon the aftermath of that commotion. The corpses of 12 Ottoman soldiers lay in the sand, their bodies contorted into impossible positions. They were only recognizable as Ottomans by their uniforms, you see. Their bodies were little more than husks. Whiter than snow, skin shriveled so tightly that the skeletons underneath them protruded. Their death masks were frozen screams. Whatever had killed these men had somehow done it in seemingly less than a minute. From the looks of things, all of their blood, marrow, seemingly even muscle tissue had been drained from their bodies. Those hollow eye sockets. Christ. Looking around at my bewildered regiment, I couldn't see the pale soldier amongst any of them. Not until we had retreated back to the embankment was when I saw him. I made eye contact with him, standing behind us as over 50 feet away from me, behind a clump of tall grass. He was just staring, wordless and cold, like he always did. Even then, I had a feeling that he was the one responsible. Somehow. The last time I ever saw that pale soldier was indeed on the 4th of January, 1916. A few days prior, Private Boyle, who often acted as a night watchman, confided in me that he too had suspected the peculiar man to be the culprit behind the horrifying deaths of those Ottoman soldiers. He was the only other man who ever talked to me directly about this matter. Said that we were all in just as much danger as those Ottoman soldiers had been, claimed that the man had been watching him and that he knew exactly what this man was, but he didn't say too much regarding that. He just mumbled something about a tale his father had told him, a tale from the old country, as he said. On the 4th of January 1916, I awoke to a scream from just beyond the embankment at around 5 in the morning. I brandished my rifle and I climbed the embankment in a hurry, completely ignoring the prospect of a bullet between my eyes. And there was a gunshot just up ahead, followed by this ghastly howl that stopped me in my tracks. No animal I'd ever heard made a sound like that, and certainly no person. The noise was somewhere between pain and some kind of perverse scream of pleasure. I can hardly describe it. There was no other sound in the world like it, that I can tell you. Lying 10 feet in front of me was Private Boyle, writhing in agony and clutching his neck. I reached him in seconds, yelling for aid the whole time as the officers in the embankment began to stir. Just beyond Boyle's dying body lay a tattered British Army uniform and a discarded rifle. The half-light of the morning illuminated the dunes ahead just enough for me to see a ghostly white, naked form, dashing like the wind ahead of me. I yelled after it to stop, only to be greeted with another horrible scream as it disappeared into the horizon. As I knelt down, Boyle grabbed my arm fiercely, his eyes bulging as he struggled against death, but he only managed to speak one word. Strigoi. Then he was gone. The scraps of uniform that lay in the sand confirmed to me what I had thought. His killer was indeed the pale soldier, our mystery transplant, the imposter. I know not what he, or it, was planning to do to us eventually. Perhaps it had latched itself onto our regiment to pick us all off one by one, or perhaps it had disguised itself as one of us to use the Ottoman soldiers as a food supply. Perhaps it was just doing it for some manner of sick entertainment. It did not return to torment us further following Boyle's death, and I can only assume that it realized that Boyle knew what it was, and that had caused it to flee to find another source of food elsewhere. Following our exit from Gallipoli, I never saw the beast again, but I'll be damned if I ever forget those cold, dead eyes.
Mr. Smith's statement is consistent with numerous other accounts given to the EIB that tell of an unidentified pale soldier suddenly appearing within a military regiment or battalion, usually during instances of military presence in Eastern Europe. Smith's case is of particular significance at this time. It was the closest that the EIB had come to identifying the entity involved in this curious phenomenon. A 20-year investigation from the year of 1928 and ending in 1948 was launched following Smith's statement, to little avail. Following a reopening of the investigation in 1985 for another 20 years, the EIB has concluded through extensive research that the entities described in these witness statements are indeed Strigoi mort, an undead vampiric creature spoken of in Romanic folklore. Corporal Alan Smith passed away on July the 2nd, 1961. Whilst his particular case is closed, a wider investigation into the origins and habits of the Strigoi is still ongoing. Case number 110, Loop 33. Status closed. End recording.